The vast wilderness of the Adirondack Mountains holds many secrets. Jagged peaks and ancient forests create a maze where even the most experienced hikers can vanish without a trace. When Sarah Mitchell and her two young children became lost during an unexpected blizzard, their chances of survival dwindled with each passing hour. Miles away, reclusive mountain man Elijah Carter felt something calling him deep into the abandoned Silvercrest mine, a place he hadn't visited since his own family perished 5 years earlier. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What happened next would forever change the lives of everyone involved, proving that sometimes the most broken souls are precisely the ones destined to save others. November in the Adirondacks is unforgiving. The mountains transform overnight, from a canvas of autumn colors to a harsh white wasteland. Sarah Mitchell knew this, but she had come to depend on her weekend hikes as the one thing keeping her sanity intact after losing her husband, Robert, 18 months ago, to a sudden heart attack. At 34, Sarah found herself alone with 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Liam. The children were still wrestling with their grief, and these outings into nature had become their ritual, a way to feel close to Robert, who had loved these mountains. This particular Saturday morning had dawned clear and crisp, perfect hiking weather according to the forecast. The family of 3 had set out on a familiar trail near Lake Evergreen, planning a simple day hike to the old lookout point. "Mom, look what I found!" Emma called out, holding up a uniquely shaped pine cone. Her breath created small clouds in the chilly air, but her cheeks were flushed with excitement. "That's beautiful, honey. Maybe we can take it home for our nature collection," Sarah replied, adjusting her backpack. Inside were the essentials: water, energy bars, a first aid kit, and extra layers, though nothing prepared for an overnight stay. They never stayed past sunset. Liam trailed a few steps behind, meticulously documenting their journey with the old digital camera that had been his father's. "Dad would have loved this lighting," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Sarah felt the familiar pang in her chest whenever the children mentioned Robert. She managed a smile and ruffled Liam's sandy brown hair. "He sure would, buddy." The suburb weather changed with alarming speed. By early afternoon, dark clouds had swallowed the sun and the temperature plummeted. What began as light flurries quickly escalated into driving snow. Sarah consulted her phone's GPS, but the battery was draining rapidly in the cold, and reception was spotty at best. She made the decision to turn back, but the intensifying storm had already obscured the trail markers. "Mom, I'm cold," Emma whimpered, her earlier enthusiasm evaporating as the wind cut through her jacket. "I know, sweetie. We're going to find shelter and wait this out," Sarah assured her, trying to keep the worry from her voice. She needed to remain calm for the children. They pressed on through thickening snow, following what Sarah hoped was the path back to the trailhead. Instead, they found themselves in unfamiliar territory, the trees growing denser, the ground becoming rockier and steeper. The daylight was fading fast, and with it, their chances of finding their way out before nightfall. It was Liam who spotted the opening in the rock face, a dark mouth in the mountainside, partially hidden by overgrown brush. "Mom, look, maybe it's a cave." Sarah approached cautiously. It wasn't a natural cave, but the entrance to an old mine shaft, the remnants of the region's mining history. A weathered sign hung crookedly beside the entrance. "Danger, Silvercrest Mine, no entry." The wood was rotted, the warning faded by decades of exposure. Under normal circumstances, Sarah would never consider entering an abandoned mine. But with temperatures dropping dangerously and the children shivering uncontrollably, their options were limited. She shined her phone's flashlight into the darkness. The tunnel appeared to extend deep into the mountain, but the entrance seemed stable. "Enough. We'll just stay near the entrance," she told the children. "The mine will block the wind and snow. We can wait out the storm here." They carefully stepped inside, relieved to escape the howling wind. The air was stale but significantly warmer than outside. Sarah found a relatively flat area about 20 feet from the entrance, far enough to be protected from the elements, but close enough to maintain a weak cell signal. She laid out the emergency blanket from her backpack, and the three huddled together. "Try to get some rest," she told Emma and Liam, wrapping her arms around them. "I'm going to keep trying to call for help." The children eventually drifted into uneasy sleep, exhaustion overcoming their fear. Sarah continued to send text messages and attempted calls. Whenever her phone showed even a single bar of reception, the battery indicator blinks red, 10% remaining. She sent one final text with their approximate location before turning the phone off to conserve the last bit of power for an emergency. The hours crept by. The temperature inside the mine, while better than the blizzard outside, was still dangerously cold. Sarah gave her jacket to the children, covering them as best she could. She rubbed her arms, trying to generate warmth, but felt her body temperature steadily dropping. The symptoms of hypothermia were setting in: violent shivering, confusion, extreme fatigue. "Just stay awake," she whispered to herself, her voice echoing softly in the darkness. "Help will come. Stay awake for Emma and Liam." 15 miles away, in a remote cabin nestled high on Raven's Peak, Elijah Carter stoked the fire in his wood stove. At 42, his beard was streaked with premature gray, his face weathered from years of exposure to the elements. Once a successful wildlife photographer for National Geographic, Elijah had retreated from society after losing his wife Clara and 10-year-old daughter Hannah in a car accident 5 years ago. The mountains had become both his sanctuary and his prison. He survived as a modern-day mountain man, hunting, trapping, occasionally guiding wealthy tourists on specialized wilderness expeditions when his funds ran low. The minimal human contact was exactly what he wanted. The fewer people who disturbed his solitude, the fewer reminders of what he had lost. That night, sleep eluded him. Something felt off, a disturbance in the familiar rhythm of his mountain. The storm outside raged with unusual ferocity, rattling the cabin's windows. Elijah's dog Ranger, a massive grey Malamute, paced restlessly by the door, whining intermittently. "What is it, boy?" Elijah's voice was gruff from disuse. He rarely spoke aloud these days, even to Ranger. The dog looked at him with intelligent eyes, then back at the door, pawing at it insistently. "You want to get out of this mess? Not happening?" But Ranger's behavior grew more agitated. Years of survival in the wilderness had taught Elijah to trust animal instincts. He rose from his chair with a sigh, pulled on his heavy winter gear, and grabbed his emergency pack, always ready by the door. "This better be important," he muttered, opening the door to a wall of swirling white. Ranger shot out into the storm without hesitation, plowing through the deep snow. Elijah cursed under his breath but followed, switching on his powerful headlamp. The dog seemed to know exactly where he was going, making a beeline down the mountain path that led toward the old mining district. Elijah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. The Silvercrest mine. He hadn't been near that place since before the accident. Clara had been fascinated by the region's mining history, had even been writing a book about it. They had explored many of the safer, accessible tunnels together, documenting the remnants of a bygone era. After her death, he couldn't bear to return. Yet Ranger was leading him directly there, moving with urgent purpose. The dog stopped occasionally, turning to make sure Elijah was still following before continuing with determination. The journey took nearly 2 hours through treacherous conditions. When they finally reached the mine entrance, Ranger barked sharply, and disappeared into the darkness. Elijah hesitated, memories washing over him. Clara's laugh echoing in the tunnels, Hannah's wide-eyed wonder at discovering an old miner's lantern. "Damn it, Ranger!" he called out, his voice nearly lost in the wind. Drawing a deep breath, he ducked into the mine entrance. The beam of his headlamp cut through the darkness, revealing the familiar tunnel. His light caught Ranger's reflective eyes further inside. The dog barked again, more insistently this time. Elijah moved deeper into the mine, his footsteps crunching on the rocky ground. He rounded a bend in the tunnel and stopped abruptly. In the circle of his headlamp light were 3 figures huddled. Together, a woman and 2 small children. The woman's eyes fluttered open at the sudden light, squinting up at him in confusion. Her lips were blue, her body trembling violently. "Help! My children!" she managed through chattering teeth. Elijah stood frozen for a moment, the scene before him colliding with memories of his own family. Ranger nudged his hand with a cold nose, breaking the trance. He sprang into action. "I've got you," he said, shrugging off his outer coat and draping it over the woman. He checked the children, still breathing, their pulses steady but slow. The boy and girl looked to be around Hannah's age, their faces peaceful in sleep, unaware of their peril. He pulled emergency heat blankets from his pack, wrapping them securely around each child. From his thermos he poured steaming broth into the cap. "Can you drink?" he asked the woman, supporting her head. She nodded weakly, sipping the warm liquid. Some color returned to her face. "My name's Elijah. My cabin is a few hours from here. We need to get you all somewhere warm," he explained, checking her for injuries. "What's your name?" Sarah," she whispered. "Emma and Liam, my children, we got lost. The storm. Save your strength. You're going to be okay." Elijah assessed the situation quickly. The woman, Sarah, was in the worst condition, suffering, moderate to severe hypothermia. The children, protected by their mother's sacrifice, were cold but not critical. None of them would survive another night in the mine, and the storm showed no signs of abating. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He made a difficult decision. "I'm going to build a temporary shelter here, get a fire going. Once you're stable, I'll carry the children to my cabin one at a time, then come back for you." Sarah's eyes widened in fear. "Don't leave them. I'll take care of them," Elijah assured her with a gentleness in his voice that surprised even him. "I promise." Using materials from his pack and what he could scavenge in the mine entrance, Elijah constructed a makeshift enclosure that would contain heat. He found a small air shaft that would allow smoke to escape and carefully built a small fire. As the space warmed, he continued to monitor Sarah, encouraging her to take small sips of broth. The children stirred but didn't fully wake, caught in the deep sleep of exhaustion. Elijah studied their faces in the firelight, the girl with her mother's auburn hair, the boy clutching an old camera even in sleep. Something twisted painfully in his chest. "Your children," he said quietly to Sarah, who was becoming more lucid as her body temperature rose. "How old?" "Emma is 8. Liam is 6, she replied, her voice stronger now. "My husband. He died last year. Heart attack. These mountains. They were his favorite place." Elijah nodded, understanding the unspoken. The mountains could be both, healing and deadly, a sanctuary and a tomb. "My wife and daughter, car accident, 5 years ago." Sarah's eyes met his, recognition of shared grief passing between them. "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." Once the temporary shelter was secure and Sarah was stable enough to be left with supplies and the fire, Elijah prepared to transport the children. He bundled Emma in multiple layers, secured her to his chest with climbing straps, and instructed Ranger to stay with Sarah and Liam. "I'll be back within 3 hours," he promised. "Ranger will keep you warm and safe." The journey back to his cabin with Emma was grueling. The storm had intensified, visibility reduced to mere feet. Elijah relied on his intimate knowledge of the mountain and sheer determination. He thought of Hannah with each labored step through the deep snow, her weight in his arms, a ghost of memory overlaid with the present. At the cabin, he worked quickly, stoking the fire to blazing, arranging warm bedding, preparing more broth and hot water bottles. He settled Emma into his own bed, checking her vitals and ensuring she was beginning to warm properly before heading back out into the storm. The round trip took less time now that he had a broken trail to follow. He found Sarah sitting up against the wall of the mine, Liam's head in her lap. Ranger lay pressed against her side, providing warmth. "Emma?" she asked immediately. "Safe. Warming up at my cabin." "She hasn't fully woken yet," Elijah replied, kneeling to check Liam. "Your son's next." The boy stirred slightly as Elijah lifted him. "Dad?" he murmured, eyes partially opening. Elijah's throat tightened. "No, buddy. I'm Elijah. I'm taking you somewhere safe." The second journey was easier than the first, Liam being lighter than his sister. The boy drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling about his camera and asking for his father. Each word was a knife in Elijah's heart. After settling Liam beside his sister in the cabin, Elijah made the final trip back to the mine. He found Sarah attempting to stand, determination written across her pale face. "Stubborn," he commented, not unkindly. "But you're not walking out of here. My children are safe, warm, and waiting for their mother," he finished for her. "Now it's your turn." Sarah was significantly weaker than she had tried to appear. Once outside the mine, Elijah realized she wouldn't be able to make the journey even with his support. Without asking permission, he lifted her into his arms. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "Not in this storm, not in your condition," he replied, already moving forward. "Rest, save your strength for your children." The final journey was the most difficult. Elijah's muscles screamed in protest, fatigue threatening to overcome him. The storm had reached its peak, snow now waist-deep in places. But something drove him forward, a purpose he hadn't felt in years. As they neared the cabin, Sarah spoke softly against his shoulder. "Why did you come? How did you find us?" Elijah glanced down at Ranger, who was forging a path ahead of them. "Wasn't me. It was him. He knew. Somehow he knew you were there. Your dog saved our lives." "He's good at that," Elijah replied. "Saving lives." He didn't add that Ranger had saved his too in a different way after the accident, had given him a reason to continue when there seemed to be none. The warm glow of the cabin appeared through the trees, a beacon in the white darkness. Elijah felt Sarah relax in his arms, sensing safety within reach. As they crossed the threshold, into warmth and light, something shifted in the atmosphere between them, strangers connected by tragedy, now bound by survival. Emma and Liam were awake, wrapped in blankets by the roaring fire, their faces lit up at the sight of their mother. "Mom!" they cried in unison, reaching for her as Elijah gently set her down on the worn sofa. The family reunion brought unexpected tears to Elijah's eyes. He turned away, busying himself with preparations for hot food and medicines, giving them privacy for their embrace. When he turned back, 3 pairs of eyes were watching him, cautious, grateful, curious. "Thank you," Sarah said simply, the words carrying the weight of lives saved. Elijah nodded awkwardly, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Storm's not letting up. You'll stay here until it passes, and you're strong enough to travel. Could be a few days." He gestured to the cabin's sparse interior, the single bedroom, the main living area with kitchen, the bookshelves filled with volumes on wilderness survival and photography. "It's not much, but it's warm and safe." Emma studied him with solemn eyes. Are you a real mountain man? Like in stories? The question caught him off guard. He rubbed his bearded jaw self-consciously. I suppose some might call me that. Cool, Liam whispered, clutching his camera. Can I take your picture? Liam, Sarah admonished gently. Mr. Carter has done enough for us. Let's not impose further. Elijah, he corrected. Just Elijah. He hesitated, then added, and the picture's fine, if you want. As the storm raged outside, inside the cabin was alive with an energy that had been absent for 5 long years. Elijah moved about, preparing a hearty stew from preserved venison and root vegetables, setting out clean clothes that would swallow the children, but serve until their own were dried. Sarah watched him, noting the precision of his movements, the way he anticipated needs before they were voiced. A man accustomed to solitude, but not incapable of care. "You said you lost your family?" she said quietly, when the children were occupied with Ranger, who had taken an immediate liking to them. "Is that why you're here, alone in the mountains?" Elijah paused in his task, staring into the fire. "Partly. We were happy here, Clara, Hannah, and me. After they were gone, I couldn't bear to leave. Everywhere else they were just gone. Here, I can still feel them sometimes." Sarah nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's why we hike these trails. Robert loved them so much. When we're here, it's like he's just around the next bend waiting for us." "Does it help?" Elijah asked, genuinely curious. "Being where they love to be?" "Some days," she admitted. "Other days, it just reminds me of what we've lost." She watched Emma laugh as Ranger licked her face. "But the children need those connections. They need to remember him in places where he was happy." Elijah served the stew in mismatched bowls, thinking about what she had said. He had chosen isolation, wrapping his grief around him like armor. Sarah had chosen to face her loss head-on, to help her children navigate their pain while managing her own. As they ate, the wind howled around the cabin's sturdy walls. The storm outside contrasted with the unexpected warmth that had bloomed within. A temporary family formed by circumstance and survival, connected by shared loss and newfound hope. Emma yawned widely, her eyelids growing heavy. Liam was already nodding off over his empty bowl. Elijah quietly prepared the bedroom for the family, adding extra blankets and stoking the small wood stove in the corner. "You all take the bedroom," he told Sarah. "I'll sleep out here by the fire." Sarah looked, ready to protest, but nodded gratefully instead. "Just for tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out a better arrangement." After helping her settle the children, Elijah returned to his chair by the main fireplace. Ranger curled at his feet. The dog looked up at him with knowing eyes. "Don't look so smug," Elijah muttered. "I know what you did." Ranger rested his head on Elijah's boot, sighing contentedly. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. The silence was broken by the soft breathing of children, the occasional creak of the bed as Sarah adjusted her position. Normal sounds, human sounds. Outside, the blizzard began to ease, the wind's howl softening to a whisper. By morning, the storm would pass, leaving a transformed landscape, pristine, renewed, full of possibility, much like the change beginning to take root in Elijah's heart. As he closed his eyes and slept without nightmares for the first time in years. Morning arrived with an almost unnatural stillness. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the cabin's frost-covered windows, casting prisms of light across Elijah's weathered floor. He had been awake for hours, stoking the fire and preparing a simple breakfast of oatmeal with dried berries and honey, food he rarely bothered with when alone. The bedroom door creaked open, and Sarah emerged, looking better than she had the night before. Color had returned to her face, though dark circles rimmed her eyes. "The children are still sleeping," she said softly, accepting the steaming mug of coffee he offered. "I checked them through the night. No signs of frostbite, just exhaustion. Elijah nodded, relieved. The storm's passed, but there's at least 3 feet of fresh snow out there. Nobody's getting down this mountain for a few days, not safely. Sarah wrapped her hands around the mug, absorbing its warmth. I need to let someone know we're alive. My sister in Albany will have reported us missing by now. There's a radio, Elijah replied, gesturing to the equipment in the corner, a ham radio setup he maintained for emergencies. I'll contact the ranger station once the sun's fully up. Reception's better then. They fell into companionable silence, watching the sunrise illuminate the snow-covered landscape outside. The world had been transformed overnight, trees bent under the weight of snow, familiar contours smoothed into graceful mounds, everything pristine and untouched. It's beautiful, Sarah whispered, moving to the window. Dangerous, but beautiful. Like most worthwhile things, Elijah commented, joining her. Their shoulders nearly touched as they gazed out at the winter wonderland. He cleared his throat, suddenly uncomfortable with the proximity. I'll check the perimeter, make sure everything's secure. Outside, the cold air bit at his lungs, a welcome shock after the unusual warmth that had spread through him inside. Ranger bounded through the snow, disappearing and reappearing as he plowed through drifts. Elijah made his way around the cabin, checking for damage from the storm and clearing paths to the woodpile and outhouse. His mind kept returning to his unexpected guests. Years of isolation had made him unaccustomed to conversation, to sharing space. Yet something about Sarah's quiet strength, her devotion to her children, resonated with him. He understood the weight she carried, the responsibility of being everything to those who depended on you, the constant fear of failing them. The sound of laughter drew his attention back to the cabin. Through the window, he could see Liam and Emma were awake now, sitting at his rough-hewn table, while Sarah poured oatmeal into bowls. The scene was so domestic, so ordinary, yet it struck him like a physical blow, a glimpse of what he had lost, what he had purposely walled himself off from for 5 long years. "They're not yours," he reminded himself harshly. "They'll leave as soon as the path's clear." By the time he returned inside, Elijah had his emotions firmly in check. He shook off the snow from his boots and approached the radio setup, adjusting dials with practiced hands. "Hudson Valley Ranger Station, this is Carter at Raven's Peak Cabin, over," he transmitted, keeping his voice even. After several attempts, the radio crackled to life. "Carter, Jerry Bennett here. Been a while since we heard from you. Everything okay up there? That was some storm. I've got 3 people here who need assistance," Elijah explained. "Sarah Mitchell and her 2 children, Emma and Liam. They got caught in the blizzard yesterday, took shelter in Silvercrest Mine. They're safe now, but were reported missing." The radio was silent for a moment. Then, "The Mitchells? Hell, we've had search parties gearing up since dawn. Albany PD contacted us last night. Their aunt reported them missing when they didn't return home. Everyone figured they were goners in that storm." Sarah approached the radio, her expression hopeful. "Can I speak to them?" Elijah handed her the microphone, showing her how to press the transmit button. "This is Sarah Mitchell," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My children and I are safe. Mr. Carter found us in the mine and brought us to his cabin. Please let my sister Catherine Dawson know we're all right." "Will do, ma'am," Bennett responded, relief evident in his voice. "We can't get a helicopter up there with these conditions, and the access roads won't be cleared for at least 2 days. Can you folks hold tight until then?" Elijah took back the microphone. "They'll be fine here, Jerry. I've got supplies, heat, everything they need." "Roger that. We'll be in touch about extraction once conditions improve. And Carter, good work, man. Those search parties had about a snowball's chance in hell of finding them alive." After signing off, Elijah turned to find all 3 Mitchells watching him, Sarah with gratitude, the children with undisguised curiosity. "So we have to stay here?" Emma asked, picking at a loose thread on the oversized flannel shirt she was wearing. With you and Ranger? Elijah nodded awkwardly. Just for a few days, until they can clear the roads. Cool, Liam exclaimed, his earlier shyness apparently forgotten. Can you show me how to be a mountain man, like how to track animals and stuff? Sarah put a hand on her son's shoulder. Liam, Mr. Carter isn't running a wilderness camp. We shouldn't impose. It's fine, Elijah said, surprising himself. There are things to do around here that might interest them. Keeps cabin fever at bay. The day unfolded with unexpected ease. Elijah showed Liam how to identify animal tracks in the fresh snow. Rabbit, fox, deer, and once, to the boy's delight, a set of massive prints belonging to a moose. Emma discovered Elijah's collection of field guides and spent hours poring over the illustrations, asking thoughtful questions about the plants and animals. Sarah, meanwhile, moved about the cabin with quiet efficiency, organizing their limited supplies, mending a tear in Emma's coat with thread and needle from Elijah's emergency kit. He found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, the gentle way she spoke to her children, the determined set of her jaw when facing challenges, the occasional glimpse of profound sadness that crossed her features when she thought no one was watching. By late afternoon, Elijah had shown Liam how to safely build and maintain a fire, while Emma helped prepare a stew from preserved vegetables and wild game. "You're good with them," Sarah observed quietly as they stood side by side, watching the children play an improvised game with Ranger in the main room. "Natural," Elijah stiffened. "I had practice once." Sarah's hand briefly touched his arm, a gesture of understanding that required no words. He didn't pull away. That evening, as they shared the hearty stew around the table, Liam suddenly asked, "Can we see your pictures, Mr. Elijah? Mum said you used to be a photographer." Elijah glanced at Sarah, who looked apologetic. "I saw some equipment in the storage chest when I was looking for extra blankets," she explained. "I hope you don't mind that I mentioned it." He hadn't opened those cases in years. After the accident, he'd packed away his cameras, his prints, the remnants of his former life. But looking at the hopeful faces of the children, he found himself nodding. "After dinner," he said, his voice gruff. Later, with the dishes cleared and the fire crackling, Elijah reluctantly pulled the dusty cases from beneath his bed. The familiar weight of his old Nikon in his hands brought a rush of memories. Clara, smiling as he adjusted the focus, Hannah photobombing his carefully composed shots of wildlife. He passed around prints from expeditions to Alaska, the Amazon, the Serengeti. The children exclaimed over images of bears fishing for salmon, jaguars lurking in dense foliage, elephants bathing in sun-dappled pools. "These are amazing," Sarah murmured, examining a particularly striking photo of a snow leopard. "You have a real talent." "Had," Elijah corrected. "I don't do this anymore." "Why not?" Emma asked, looking up from a photo of penguins huddled against an Antarctic storm. The question hung in the air. Elijah met Sarah's eyes over the child's head, saw the understanding there. "Sometimes," Sarah answered for him, "when people lose someone they love, the things that used to bring them joy become too painful. It's like the joy and the sadness get all tangled up together." Emma considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Like how I couldn't play soccer after Dad died, because he always came to my games." "Exactly like that," Sarah said softly. Liam, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly held up his father's old digital camera. "Dad gave me this before he got sick. I take pictures to remember him by." His small face was serious beyond his years. "Maybe you could take pictures again? Not to forget them, but to remember them better." Elijah had no response to the child's innocent wisdom. He carefully returned the prints to their case, but not before tucking the snow leopard photo into Liam's hand. "Keep it," he said simply. "A photographer should study good composition." That night, sleeping arrangements were revised. Elijah insisted the children take his bed, while he and Sarah would use the pull-out couch and sleeping bags in the main room. They worked together in silent efficiency, preparing for the night as though they had done it countless times before. As the cabin grew quiet, with only the occasional pop from the fireplace breaking the silence, Sarah's voice came softly through. "The darkness. Thank you. Not just for rescuing us, but for today. It's been healing for them, I think, to see a man who understands their grief." Elijah stared at the ceiling, Ranger's warm weight pressing against his side. "They're good kids. You've done well with them, on your own. Most days I feel like I'm failing them," she admitted. "That they need more than I can give. They need what you're already giving them. Honesty about grief, permission to remember, courage to continue." He hadn't meant to say so much, but the darkness made confession easier somehow. The silence stretched between them, comfortable and thoughtful. Just as Elijah was drifting toward sleep, Sarah spoke again. "Why the Silvercrest mine? Was it just a coincidence that you found us there? Of all places." Elijah's eyes snapped open. He considered evading the question, but found he didn't want to. "My wife Clara was researching the mining history of the region, writing a book, that particular mine. We'd explored it together many times. After she died, I couldn't go back, until yesterday." "What changed yesterday?" "Ranger," he said simply. "He knew something was wrong, led me straight there." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Do you believe in signs? Maybe there was a reason it happened that way." Elijah had asked himself the same question throughout the day. Why that mine? Why after 5 years of avoiding it? "I don't know about signs," he said finally, "but I'm beginning to think isolation isn't the answer I thought it was." Morning brought a new routine. Elijah woke to find Sarah already up, teaching the children how to make simple biscuits using his limited supplies. Outside, the sun shone brilliantly on the snow, creating a dazzling display that required squinted eyes to appreciate. "The ranger station radioed while you were out chopping wood," Sarah informed him. "Roads are still blocked, but they're making progress. Maybe tomorrow or the next day." Elijah nodded, ignoring the unexpected twinge of disappointment. "We should keep the children occupied. Cabin fever sets in quick with little ones." Sarah smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her tired face. "You have any ideas?" "A few." The day unfolded with lessons in wilderness survival delivered with unexpected patience. Elijah showed the children how to identify edible plants in his dried collection, how to read weather from cloud formations, how to navigate using natural markers. Liam absorbed every word, his camera documenting each demonstration. Emma proved to have a natural talent for knot tying, mastering complex configurations that Elijah used for his traps. At one point, Sarah found herself alone in the cabin, while Elijah took the children to observe deer at a nearby clearing. She wandered to the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines of well-worn volumes, survival guides, photography collections, and to her surprise, poetry. Frost, Whitman, Oliver, unexpected choices for the gruff mountain man. A particular volume caught her eye, Mining the Adirondacks, a photographic history. She pulled it from the shelf, opening to the title page where an inscription read, "For Elijah, who helps me see beauty in forgotten places. All my love, Clara." Sarah carefully returned the book to its place, feeling like an intruder in this small, preserved corner of Elijah's grief. On impulse, she moved to the window, gazing out at the snow-covered landscape. In the distance, she could see 3 figures and a dog making their way back toward the cabin, Elijah pointing out something to the children, who were listening with rapt attention. The scene triggered an ache of recognition, not unlike how Robert had been with them. The cabin door burst open, bringing a gust of cold air and excited chatter. "Mom, we saw a whole herd of deer," Liam exclaimed, his cheeks red from the cold. And Elijah showed me how to walk super quiet so they didn't run away. And we found tracks from a bobcat, Emma added, equally animated. Ranger wanted to follow them, but Elijah said bobcats need their privacy. Sarah smiled, helping them out of their snow-crusted outer layers. Sounds like an adventure. Her eyes met Elijah's over the children's heads. Something had shifted in his expression, a softening around the edges, a spark of life in eyes that had been dull with grief when they first met. That afternoon, as the children napped, exhausted from their expedition, Sarah and Elijah sat on the small covered porch, mugs of hot tea warming their hands. "You were right," Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence, "about the children needing distraction. I haven't seen them this present since before Robert died. Especially Liam." Elijah nodded, watching Ranger chase snowflakes that had begun to drift lazily from the sky. "Kids are resilient, more than we give them credit for. They carry the grief, but they're not defined by it, not yet." "Unlike us," Sarah observed quietly. He couldn't argue with that. They had both allowed loss to reshape their lives completely. Sarah, by focusing entirely on her children's needs at the expense of her own. Elijah, by retreating from the world altogether. "I found your poetry books," she admitted. "Wouldn't have pegged you for a Whitman fan." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. In Clara's influence, she believed poetry helped us see the extraordinary in the ordinary. I didn't understand that until after she was gone. The confession hung between them, intimate in its honesty. Sarah looked out at the vast expanse of white stretching before them. "What happens when the road's clear?" she asked, the question that had been hovering unspoken all day. "You go home," Elijah replied, his voice carefully neutral. "Back to your lives." Sarah nodded, staring into her mug. "And you stay here, alone." "It's what I know now." "Is it what you want?" The question struck him like a physical blow. Want had not factored into his existence for 5 years. He had survived, existed, persisted. But want, desire, these had been luxuries he denied himself as penance for being the one who lived, when Clara and Hannah did not. Before he could formulate an answer, the radio inside crackled to life. Elijah rose, grateful for the interruption, and went to answer it. "Carter, Bennett here from the station. Good news. Plow crews have reached the lower access road. Should have the full route cleared by noon tomorrow. We'll send up a vehicle." "For the Mitchells, then?" "Copy that," Elijah responded, aware of Sarah standing in the doorway behind him. "We'll be ready." The news should have brought relief. Instead, it cast a pall over the evening. The children, upon hearing they would leave, the next day, grew subdued. Liam clung to Ranger, burying his face in the dog's thick fur. Emma requested Elijah read aloud from one of the nature guides, hanging on his every word, as though trying to memorize his voice. As Sarah tucked them into bed later, she overheard Liam whisper, "I don't want to go, Mom. I like it here with Elijah. And Ranger." "I know, sweetheart," she murmured, smoothing his hair, "but we have our home, our school, our lives back in Albany." "But Elijah will be all alone again," Emma pointed out, her young face creased with worry. "That's not right. Nobody should be alone." Sarah had no answer for her daughter's simple wisdom. She kissed them both good night and returned to the main room, where Elijah was meticulously packing supplies into 3 backpacks. "For the journey down," he explained without looking up. "Extra layers, food, emergency supplies in case conditions change." Sarah watched him work, noting the precision of his movements, the careful consideration given to each item. "You think of everything. Have to up here. Preparation means survival." She sat across from him, helping to organize the smaller items. "The children are upset about leaving," she said directly. "They've grown attached." Elijah's hands stilled momentarily. "Kids adapt quickly. They'll forget about the crazy mountain man once they're back with their friends, their normal lives. Is that what you want? To be forgotten? He looked up then, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. What I want hasn't mattered for a long time. It matters to me, Sarah said softly, and to Emma and Liam. The silence between them grew charged with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Elijah stood, moving to stare out the window at the star-filled sky. I didn't save you by accident, he said, his back to her. Clara loved the Silver Crest mine because of a legend attached to it. Local miners believed it had a guardian spirit that led lost souls to safety. She was documenting the stories for her book. He turned to face her. I never believed any of it, until Ranger led me straight to you, in the one place I'd avoided for 5 years. Sarah rose, moving to stand before him. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe there are no accidents. Maybe we were meant to find each other, all of us broken, in our different ways. His voice was rough with emotion he'd kept buried for too long. But that doesn't change reality. You have a life to return to. I have... He gestured around the cabin. This. It doesn't have to be that way, Sarah said, reaching out to touch his arm. This doesn't have to be goodbye. Elijah looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then up to her face, illuminated by the soft glow of the fire. For 5 years, he had closed himself off from connection, from the possibility of healing. Now, standing before him, was a woman who understood his loss, who carried her own grief with grace and courage, who had awakened something in him he thought had died with Clara. What are you proposing? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know exactly, Sarah admitted, but I know that meeting you, being here, it's changed something for all of us. The children feel it too, like we were drowning in our grief and suddenly found solid ground. Outside, the wind picked up swirling snow around the cabin in ethereal patterns. Inside, the firelight flickered across their faces as they stood on the precipice of possibility. 2 people who had learned to exist without hope, suddenly confronted with its fragile return. The night deepened around the isolated cabin, stars wheeling overhead in their ancient patterns. Within those walls, something new was taking root, tentative and uncertain, but alive with promise. As the fire burned down to embers, 2 souls who had been frozen in grief began to thaw, just as Sarah had been rescued from the literal cold. Of the abandoned mine, tomorrow would bring decisions, practicalities, the return to the world below. But tonight, in this moment suspended between past and future, they allowed themselves to glimpse what might be possible. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something new, something unexpected. A second chance born in the depths of winter, in the most unlikely of places, between the most unlikely of hearts. Dawn arrived with the distant sound of engines, the snow plows and rescue vehicles making their final push up the mountain. Elijah stood on the porch, watching the sun paint the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. The beauty felt like a mockery of the turmoil within him. Inside, the cabin hummed with activity as Sarah helped the children prepare for departure. Their voices drifted through the half-open door, Emma wondering if they could visit again, Liam asking if Ranger would miss him, Sarah's gentle responses neither promising nor dismissing the possibilities. Ranger sat beside Elijah, his intelligent eyes fixed on his master's face. Don't look at me like that, Elijah muttered. You started all this. The dog's tail thumped against the wooden porch in what seemed like agreement. The sound of footsteps behind him announced Sarah's presence. She joined him at the railing, her breath-forming clouds in the crisp morning air. Beautiful day for a journey, she observed, her voice carefully neutral. Elijah nodded, unable to find appropriate words. What was there to say? Thanks for visiting. Have a nice life. The casual dismissal felt impossible after the intensity of their shared days. I've been thinking about what happens next, Sarah said, breaking the weighted silence. For us, I mean. Before Elijah could respond, the distant growl of engines grew louder. A large rescue vehicle appeared around the bend in the access road, followed by a Ranger patrol truck. Reality, arriving right on schedule. "Mom, they're here!" Liam called, bursting onto the porch with Emma close behind. The boy's excitement faltered as he looked between the adults. "Do we really have to go?" Sarah knelt before her son, straightening his jacket. "Yes, sweetie. We need to get back to Aunt Catherine. She's been worried sick about us." "But what about Elijah?" Emma asked, her small hand slipping into Elijah's rough one. "Who'll take care of him and Ranger?" Elijah squeezed her hand gently. "We've been taking care of ourselves for a long time, kiddo." "But everyone needs somebody," the girl insisted, with the unshakable conviction of childhood. "That's what Mom always says." Sarah's eyes met Elijah's over their daughter's head, a silent communication passing between them. "And Mom's usually right," he conceded, surprised at the emotion thickening his voice. "But some things take time to figure out." The vehicles pulled up to the cabin, and Jerry Bennett emerged from the Ranger truck, stamping snow from his boots. "Morning, Carter! Mitchells!" he called cheerfully. "Beautiful day for a rescue, isn't it?" The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. The rescue team checked the family for lingering effects of their ordeal, while Elijah loaded their backpacks into the vehicles. Sarah provided a brief statement for the official report, downplaying the severity of their condition when Elijah had found them. "If not for Mr. Carter and his dog, we wouldn't have survived the night," she concluded, her voice steady, but her eyes revealing the depth of her gratitude. Bennett clapped Elijah on the shoulder. "Always knew you were more than just the crazy hermit everyone thinks you are." "Don't spread it around," Elijah replied dryly. "Bad for my reputation." The moment of departure arrived too quickly. The children clung to Ranger, whispering private goodbyes into his fur. Elijah knelt beside them, surprising himself by pulling them into a brief, awkward hug. "Remember what I taught you about the northern constellations," he told Liam. "And you," he said to Emma, "keep practicing those knots. Never know when they'll come in handy." "We will," they promised in unison, their eyes bright with unshed tears. Finally he stood before Sarah, the words he needed to say stuck in his throat, trapped by years of self-imposed isolation and fear of connection. "Thank you," she said simply, saving him from his silence. "For everything." She pressed a folded piece of paper into his hand. "Our address and phone number in Albany. If you ever decide to come down from the mountain." She left the invitation open-ended. "Safe journey," he managed, pocketing the paper. As the vehicles pulled away, Liam and Emma waved frantically from the back window until the trees obscured their view. Elijah stood watching long after they disappeared, Ranger, a steady presence, at his side. The cabin, when he finally returned inside, seemed impossibly empty. The lingering scent of the breakfast they had shared, the indentation on the couch where Sarah had sat, a small hair ribbon of Emma's forgotten on the table, evidence that the past few days hadn't been a dream. Elijah moved through the space, mechanically restoring order, erasing the physical signs of his visitors. But their presence had altered something fundamental within these walls, within himself. The silence, once comforting, now echoed with absence. He retrieved the paper from his pocket, smoothing it flat on the table. Such a simple thing. An address, a phone number, a connection to the world below, a choice he could make. "What do you think, Ranger?" he asked, glancing at the dog. "Should we shake things up a bit?" Ranger's enthusiastic bark seemed answer enough. Albany greeted the Mitchells with a flurry of attention. Catherine had alerted local media about the miraculous rescue, and reporters waited at the hospital where the family was taken for evaluation. Sarah deflected their questions with practiced patience, protecting her children from the spotlight while acknowledging the remarkable circumstances of their survival. "We were incredibly fortunate that Mr. Carter found us when he did," she repeated, refusing to elaborate on the personal aspects of their time at the cabin. Those memories felt too precious, too private to share with strangers hungry for a heartwarming story. The doctors pronounced them remarkably well, considering their ordeal. "Your rescuer knew exactly what he was doing," the emergency physician commented. "Treating hypothermia in stages, proper rehydration, monitoring for delayed symptoms. You couldn't have been in better hands if you'd been in our ICU." Life gradually returned to its routine. The children went back to school. Sarah resumed her work as a high school English teacher, and the media interest eventually faded. But the experience had altered them in subtle yet profound ways. Liam spoke of Elijah constantly, proudly showing his classmates the snow leopard photograph and recounting wilderness skills he'd learned. Emma had taken to practicing knot tying, with remarkable dedication, creating an elaborate system for organizing her belongings that she insisted was how Elijah would do it. Even Sarah found herself scanning the tree line during their now infrequent hikes, half expecting to see a tall figure with a grey dog emerging from the woods. Weeks passed with no word from the mountain. Sarah told herself this was expected. The man had lived in isolation for 5 years after all. Change wouldn't come easily, if at all. Still, each evening she found herself checking the mailbox with irrational hope, each knock at the door triggering a momentary surge of anticipation. By late January, Sarah had begun to accept that their encounter, however meaningful, had been just that, an intense connection forged in crisis, not meant to extend into ordinary life. She tucked away her disappointment, focusing instead on the positive changes in her children. They seemed more resilient now, their grief for their father still present but no longer all-consuming. One Friday afternoon, as Sarah was grading papers in her classroom after school, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, with a rural area. "Code, Sarah Mitchell," a gruff, hesitant voice asked when she answered. Her heart leapt to her throat. "Elijah?" "Yeah. Sorry it took so long for me to call. Needed to sort some things out." Sarah set down her pen, her hands suddenly unsteady. "I understand. I'm glad you did, eventually." "I'm in Albany," he said, the words tumbling out as if he feared losing his nerve. "Just arrived. I've got Ranger with me. I thought maybe, if you're not busy, the kids might like to see him, and me, I guess." The vulnerability in his voice brought a smile to her face. They would love that, and so would I. An hour later, Sarah pulled into her driveway to find a weathered truck parked at the curb. Elijah stood beside it, looking distinctly uncomfortable, in clean jeans and a flannel shirt that seemed newer than his cabin attire. Ranger sat at attention beside him, tail sweeping the sidewalk at the sight of Sarah. "You cut your hair," she observed, approaching them. The wild beard was trimmed, the long hair shortened to a more conventional length. Elijah rubbed his jaw self-consciously. "Thought I should make an effort not to terrify your neighbors." Before she could respond, the front door burst open. Emma and Liam had spotted them through the window, and they flew down the steps with cries of delight. Ranger met them halfway, nearly bowling them over in his excitement. Elijah stood back, watching the reunion with an expression that mixed pleasure and uncertainty. When the initial excitement subsided, Sarah invited him inside. The modest suburban home was a stark contrast to his rustic cabin, filled with family photos, children's artwork, colorful furniture that prioritized comfort over style. "It's not much," she said, suddenly seeing the space through his eyes. "But it's home." Elijah looked around with genuine interest. "It's exactly what I imagined. Warm, lived in, happy." The evening unfolded with surprising ease. The children monopolized Elijah, showing him their rooms, their school projects, their treasured possessions. He listened with patient attention, treating each item and story with the seriousness they deserved. When Liam proudly displayed his growing collection of nature photographs, Elijah offered specific, thoughtful feedback. that had the boy beaming with pride. Sarah prepared a simple dinner, watching from the kitchen as Emma taught Elijah the rules of her favorite board game. The sight of the solemn mountain man, hunched over colorful plastic pieces, deliberating each move with exaggerated concentration to match the girl's intensity, created a warmth in Sarah's chest that had nothing to do with the oven's heat. Later, after the children had reluctantly gone to bed, Sarah and Elijah sat in the living room with mugs of coffee. Ranger lay sprawled across the carpet, apparently making himself at home. "You look well," Sarah observed, "more rested than when we left." Elijah nodded. "I've been busy, making changes." "What kind of changes?" He set down his mug, choosing his words carefully. "After you left, the cabin felt different, empty in a way it hadn't before, made me realize I'd been using isolation as a shield, not a healing space." "And now?" Sarah prompted gently when he fell silent. "I've been working with the ranger station. They needed someone to monitor wildlife populations in the remote areas, document migration patterns, using my photography skills again." Sarah smiled, remembering Liam's innocent suggestion about taking pictures to remember, not forget. "That sounds perfect for you. It gets me out, connecting with the world a bit." He hesitated, then added, "I've also been talking with the Historical Society about Clara's research. They want to publish her work on the mining communities. I've been organizing her notes, adding my photographs." "Elijah, that's wonderful," Sarah said, genuinely moved by this tribute to his late wife. He shrugged, still uncomfortable with praise. "Feels right, honoring her work instead of burying it, like you do with Robert's memory for the kids." The comparison touched her deeply. "It's not always easy." "No," he agreed, "but necessary." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That's partly why I'm here. I've been thinking about what you said last night at the cabin, about this not being goodbye." Sarah's heart quickened. And I'm not ready to leave the mountain permanently. It's still where I belong, but I'm thinking maybe there's a middle path between total isolation and whatever normal people do." His attempted smile was endearingly awkward. "What would this middle path look like?" Sarah asked, careful to keep her tone neutral despite the hope building within her. "I've fixed up the access road to the cabin, made some improvements to the place, proper guest room, better heating system. I thought maybe, when you're ready, you and the kids might want to visit, not the way you did the first time, preferably." His attempt at humor made her smile. "I think we could manage that, and maybe sometimes, when I have business in Albany, I could stop by. If that's okay." "It's more than okay," Sarah said softly. Elijah nodded, relief evident in his expression. "I'm not promising anything dramatic. I'm still working through things. But meeting you three, it woke something up. Reminded me there's still life out. They're worth connecting with." "I understand," Sarah assured him. "We're all still figuring this out. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility." The word hung between them, filled with potential. Outside, snow began to fall, not the threatening blizzard of their first meeting, but gentle flakes drifting peacefully in the glow of the streetlights. "Will you stay tonight?" Sarah asked. "There's a guest room. The children would love to have breakfast with you before you head back." "I'd like that," Elijah replied, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Thank you." Their conversation continued late into the night, sharing stories of their lives before loss had reshaped them. Sarah spoke of meeting Robert in college, their early struggles, the joy of the children's births. Elijah described his travels as a photographer, the moment he first met Clara at a gallery showing their shared love of the Adirondacks that had eventually led them to build the cabin. For the first time in years, neither felt the need to protect the other from their grief. They could speak of those they had lost with both sadness and laughter, honoring complete memories rather than sanitized versions. Morning arrived with the excited whispers of children discovering Elijah and Ranger still in residence. Sarah awoke to the unusual sound of laughter from the kitchen. She found Elijah attempting to make pancakes under the dubious supervision of Emma and Liam, with Ranger hoping to benefit from any culinary disasters. "Mom, Elijah's teaching us how to make blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup from his trees," Liam announced, his face smudged with flour. "Is he now?" Sarah leaned against the doorframe, taking in the domestic chaos with amusement. "And how's that going?" "There's been some trial and error," Elijah admitted, flipping a misshapen pancake with surprising dexterity. "But I think we're getting the hang of it." The scene was so unexpected, so wonderfully ordinary, that Sarah felt tears prick behind her eyes. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of joy alongside it. The ability to build something new without betraying what was lost. After breakfast, Elijah announced it was time to head back to the mountain. The children's protests were quieted by his promise to return the following month, perhaps for a longer visit. At the door, with the children distracted by giving Ranger one last belly rub, Sarah and Elijah stood facing each other. So much remained unsaid between them, yet understanding flowed nonetheless. "Safe journey," she said, echoing his words from their previous parting. "I'll call when I reach the cabin," he promised, a significant shift from the man who had avoided human connection for 5 years. Their goodbye was simple, a brief embrace, a meeting of eyes that acknowledged the delicate bridge being built between their separate worlds. As his truck pulled away, Sarah stood with her children, waving until it disappeared around the corner. The day stretched before them with its usual routines, homework to supervise, groceries to buy, laundry to fold. But something had shifted, a window opened to fresh possibilities. "Do you think Elijah and Ranger will really visit again?" Emma asked, looking up at her mother with hope written across her face. Sarah nodded, certainty settling in her heart. "Yes, sweetheart, I believe they will." Inside, she found a small package on the coffee table that hadn't been there the night before. Unwrapping it carefully, she discovered a framed photograph, one she hadn't seen during their time at the cabin. It showed the Silvercrest mine entrance in summer, sunlight filtering through the trees to illuminate the weathered sign. The composition transformed the abandoned mine from a place of danger to one of mysterious beauty, potential rather than decay. A note in Elijah's bold handwriting accompanied it. "Where endings become beginnings." Sarah placed the photograph on the mantel, beside a family portrait taken when Robert was still alive. Past and possible future side by side, not replacing, but expanding. A visual reminder that sometimes finding yourself freezing in the darkness is merely the prelude to warmth you never expected to find again. In the Adirondacks, spring would eventually melt the snow, revealing new growth beneath. In Albany, a family expanded its boundaries to include an unlikely mountain man and his faithful dog. And in hearts long frozen by grief, warmth returned gradually but persistently, not erasing what was lost, but creating space for what might yet be found. The story that began with a desperate search for shelter in a mountain blizzard continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Not a fairy tale ending, but something more valuable, an authentic beginning, with all its uncertainties, challenges, and precious moments of connection. For Sarah and Elijah, for Emma and Liam, even for Ranger, the mine shaft where they had first encountered each other would always represent their shared truth. That sometimes rescue comes in forms we never anticipated, and healing arrives on paths we never thought to travel. Spring arrived in Albany with a rush of green, transforming bare branches and brown lawns into vibrant life. 4 months had passed since the Mitchell family's near-tragic adventure in the Adirondacks, and 3 months since Elijah Carter's unexpected appearance on their doorstep. True to his word, Elijah had become a tentative but steady presence in their lives, Once a month, the weathered truck would appear outside their home, bringing Ranger and a man still learning to navigate the complexities of human connection. Each visit lasted a little longer than the previous one, his comfort level visibly increasing as the children incorporated him into their routines without hesitation. For Easter weekend, something unprecedented was happening. Sarah and the children were making the journey to Elijah's cabin, this time as invited guests, not desperate survivors. "Are we there yet?" Liam asked from the back seat, his face pressed against the window, as the suburban landscape gave way to increasingly rugged terrain. "Almost," Sarah replied, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter as the road narrowed and steepened. "Remember, Elijah said it's about 20 minutes after the ranger station." They had passed the station 10 minutes ago, continuing on to a newly graded access road that wound its way up the mountain. The improvements Elijah had mentioned were evident. What had likely been a treacherous path was now passable, if not comfortable, in Sarah's sedan. "There it is!" Emma suddenly shouted, pointing through the trees. The cabin came into view, and Sarah felt a strange mixture of emotions. In her memories, it had become somewhat mythologized, the place of their salvation, a haven in the wilderness. Now seeing it in daylight without the filter of hypothermia and crisis, she was struck by its modest reality. Yet Elijah had indeed been busy. The exterior showed signs of recent work. New shingles on the roof, a properly constructed porch replacing the previous makeshift landing, a neat woodpile stacked against the southern wall. As they pulled up, the door opened and Ranger bounded out, followed by his more reserved master. The children were out of the car before Sarah had fully stopped, rushing toward the dog with exuberant greetings. Elijah stood watching, a tentative smile softening his usually serious face. When Sarah finally emerged, he stepped forward to help with their bags. "Welcome back," he said simply, his eyes meeting hers briefly before darting away. "Different circumstances this time." "Much better." "Und she agreed, handing him a duffel bag. Inside, the transformation was even more apparent. The sparse, utilitarian space had been thoughtfully modified. The previously empty walls now displayed framed photographs, wildlife shots, landscapes, and a few carefully selected images of Clara and Hannah that acknowledged their memory rather than enshrining it in silence. A new door led to what had once been a storage area, now converted into a proper guest room with twin beds for the children. The main room featured additional seating, and the kitchen area had been expanded with modest but functional amenities. "You've been busy," Sarah observed, taking it all in. Elijah shrugged, a gesture she had come to recognize as his response to praise. "Figured if I was going to have visitors, they should have somewhere decent to sleep." "It's perfect," she assured him. "The kids are thrilled to be back." As if to confirm her words, Emma and Liam were already racing around, exclaiming over changes, and rediscovering favorite spots with Ranger at their heels. "Mom, Elijah built a real tree house," Liam called from the window. "Can we go see?" "After lunch," Elijah answered before Sarah could respond. "I made venison stew, and there's fresh bread from the trading post." The domesticity of the scene, Elijah serving stew into mismatched bowls, the children setting the table without being asked, Ranger hoping for scraps, struck Sarah with its simple rightness. This man who had retreated from the world had created space for them in his sanctuary, had reimagined his solitude to include their presence. After lunch, Elijah took them on a tour of the improvements to the property. Besides the tree house, a surprisingly well-crafted platform with railings and a rope ladder, he had cleared several hiking trails, constructed a fire pit with stone seating, and built a small dock on the pond a quarter-mile from the cabin. "For swimming in summer," he explained as they stood on the weathered planks. "It gets deep enough in the middle and the water's clean." "Can we come back when it's warm enough to swim?" Emma asked, already planning ahead. Elijah glanced at Sarah, deferring to her before answering. At her nod, he said, Of course. Maybe in July when the waters had time to warm up. Promise? Liam pressed, his young face serious. Something flickered. In Elijah's eyes, a momentary hesitation, the weight of a promise to children who had already experienced profound loss. I promise, he said finally, the words carrying significance beyond a simple summer invitation. That evening, after the children were settled in their new room, Sarah and Elijah sat on the porch, watching darkness claim the forest. The spring night carried a chill, but Elijah had provided woolen blankets and mugs of hot cider that steamed in the cool air. Thank you for inviting us, Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence. It means a lot to the children. To me, too. Elijah nodded, his profile illuminated by the cabin light spilling through the window. It's strange. For years, I couldn't imagine wanting anyone here. Now it feels... He searched for the right word. Right. How are you doing with all of this? Sarah asked gently. Really? He considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. It's an adjustment. Some days are harder than others, but mostly it feels like waking up after a long sleep. He turned to look at her directly. What about you? This arrangement isn't conventional. Does it cause problems for you in Albany? Sarah understood the question beneath the question. If you're asking whether people gossip about the mysterious mountain man who visits us and who we now visit, the answer is yes. Small towns and suburbs run on gossip. And that doesn't bother you? She smiled. I'm a widow with 2 children navigating a relationship with a reclusive wildlife photographer. Conventional ships sailed away a long time ago. Is that what this is? Elijah asked carefully. A relationship, isn't it? Sarah countered. Maybe not the kind with easy labels, but it's something real, something important. He nodded slowly. To me too. More than I expected. The admission hung between them, neither pushing for further definition. They were building something without blueprints, finding their way step by cautious step. The weekend unfolded with a natural rhythm. Elijah taught the children to identify bird calls, showing remarkable patience as they confused similar sounds. He took Liam on a special photography expedition, offering guidance on composition and lighting that had the boy beaming with pride at his results. For Emma, who had developed an interest in the healing properties of plants, he introduced native species with medicinal uses, carefully explaining which were safe to handle and which should only be observed. Sarah found herself with unexpected stretches of time alone, a rarity in her single-parent life. She used these moments to explore the trails around the cabin, discovering hidden viewpoints and quiet groves that spoke to Elijah's deep connection to this land. On their final evening, they built a fire in the outdoor pit. Under a canopy of stars brighter than any visible in Albany, they roasted marshmallows and shared stories. The children, exhausted from a day of outdoor adventures, eventually nodded off despite their best efforts to stay awake. Should we take them inside? Elijah asked as Emma's head drooped against his shoulder, her sticky fingers still clutching a half-eaten marshmallow. Sarah shook her head, unwilling to break the spell of the moment. Let them sleep a little longer. It's warm enough with the fire and blankets. With the children dozing, a different quality of silence emerged between the adults, more intimate, laden with unspoken possibilities. I've been offered a commission, Elijah said quietly, stoking the fire with a long stick. National Geographic, a series on the recovery of wolf populations in the Northeast. Elijah, that's wonderful, Sarah exclaimed, genuinely pleased. You're going back to professional photography? Not full-time, but yes, taking assignments again. His expression was difficult to read in the firelight. It would mean travel, several weeks at a time, tracking packs across multiple states. Understanding dawned. You're worried about how that affects this. He nodded. I just found my way back to connecting with people. With you three, specifically. I don't want to disappear again. Sarah reached across the space between them, her hand finding his. Then don't. Take the assignment because it's important work you're uniquely qualified to do. But come back. Call when you can. Send postcards to the kids. We'll be here. That simple? He asked, a rare vulnerability in his voice. Not simple at all, she corrected gently. But worthwhile things rarely are. The fire crackled between them, sending sparks spiraling toward the star-filled sky. Liam stirred slightly, murmuring. In his sleep, Ranger, ever vigilant, shifted position to press more closely against the boy. I've been thinking about the mine, Elijah said after a long pause. Silvercrest, where it all started. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The mine represented both their greatest danger and their salvation. The place where death had nearly claimed her family, where Elijah had found a reason to reconnect with life. The Historical Society wants to include it in a preservation project, he continued. Make it safe. Install informational displays about the mining era. They've asked me to photograph it, document its current state before restoration begins. How do you feel about that? Sarah asked, knowing the complex emotions the place held for him. Mixed, he admitted. It was Clara's passion project. She'd be thrilled to see it preserved, recognized for its historical significance. He poked at the fire, sending up another shower of sparks. But for me, it's become something else, sacred ground in a way. Where I found you three, where everything changed. Would you want company? Sarah offered. When you go to photograph it, the children and I could come along, face it together. Elijah considered this, his expression thoughtful. Maybe that's exactly what's needed, to transform it again from a place of fear and emergency to one of purpose and memory. Full circle, Sarah murmured. Not a circle, he corrected. A spiral. We don't return to the same place exactly. We come back around, but at a different level. The insight surprised her, revealing the philosophical mind that had developed during his years of solitude. I like that. A spiral. Eventually, they carried the sleeping children to their beds. The simple domesticity of the action, Elijah with Liam's slight weight in his arms, Sarah guiding a drowsy Emma by the hand, felt profound in its ordinariness. These small moments of shared care had become the foundation of whatever they were, building together. The next morning brought departure preparations tinged with reluctance. The children dragged their feet, finding last-minute activities to delay the inevitable. Elijah, too, seemed to invent reasons to prolong their stay. A trail he'd forgotten to show them, a special viewpoint just a short hike away. Finally, with the car packed and goodbyes exchanged for the fourth time, Sarah found herself alone with Elijah by the driver's door. This was good, she said simply. Really good. It was, he agreed. Better than I imagined. The Wolf assignment, when do you leave? 2 weeks, he replied. I'll come down to Albany before then, if that's okay. More than okay, Sarah assured him. Their farewell was brief, but held new certainty, a kiss that acknowledged the evolving nature of their connection, neither rushing nor denying its direction. As they drove down the mountain, Liam and Emma waved until the cabin disappeared from view. The descent felt different from their first journey down months earlier, not an escape from danger, but a transition between two parts of a life that was expanding to include new possibilities. Mom, Emma asked from the back seat, is Elijah going to be our new dad? The question, delivered with a child's directness, caught Sarah off guard. It's not that simple, sweetheart. Elijah and I are figuring things out, just like you and Liam are. But we care about each other, and about both of you. I think Dad would like him, Liam said with certainty. They both like taking pictures and being in the mountains. Sarah smiled at her son's simple wisdom. I think you're right. They would have gotten along well. So it's okay if we like Elijah a lot. It doesn't mean we love Dad less. Emma persisted, articulating the concern that had been simmering beneath the surface. Absolutely okay, Sarah assured her. Love isn't pie, Emma. You don't get a smaller piece when it's shared with more people. Your heart just makes room. 3 weeks later, Sarah received the first postcard from Elijah's wolf expedition. The image showed a stunning landscape of forested mountains at dawn, mist rising from the valleys. On the back, a brief message addressed to all 3 Mitchells described his first wolf sighting and the challenges of tracking the elusive animals. His handwriting, like the man himself, was straightforward and unembellished. More postcards followed over the weeks, arriving every few days, each containing observations of the natural world and brief personal notes that revealed Elijah's growing comfort with expressing connection. For the children, he included small sketches or nature facts. For Sarah, there were sometimes additional lines at the bottom, more personal reflections shared only with her. Between assignments, Elijah returned to Albany for increasingly longer visits. He attended Emma's school play and Liam's science fair, navigating the social aspects of these events with determination, if not natural ease. The children's friends accepted his presence with the unquestioning adaptability of youth, while the adults in Sarah's circle gradually moved from curiosity to acceptance of the unconventional arrangement. By late summer, when the family made their promised return to the cabin for swimming in the pond, a new rhythm had been established. Their lives remained distinct, but increasingly interwoven. Separate homes, separate daily routines, but a shared, emotional foundation that grew stronger with each visit, each phone call, each challenge navigated together. The day came for their long-discussed return to Silvercrest Mine. The Historical Society had approved the preservation project, with work scheduled to begin the following month. This visit, to document the site in its current state, would mark the mine's transition from a place of personal history to public heritage. They parked at a new trailhead, the path to the mine now cleared and marked with simple signs. Ranger led the way, his excitement at having his complete pack together evident in his prancing gait. The mine entrance appeared around a bend in the trail, looking simultaneously familiar and foreign in the summer light. The weathered warning sign still hung crookedly, scheduled to be preserved as part of the historical display. Wildflowers had reclaimed the clearing before the entrance, yellow and purple blooms nodding in the gentle breeze. The children approached with natural caution, their memories of the place softened but not erased by time. Sarah felt her heart quicken as she stood before the dark opening, remembering the desperate fear, the biting cold, the certainty that she had failed her children by leading them into danger. Elijah stepped beside her, his camera hanging unused around his neck. "Okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. Different seeing it like this, in daylight, by choice. "Changes everything," he agreed. They didn't venture deep into the mine. That would come later with proper equipment and the Historical Society team. Instead, Elijah photographed the entrance, the surrounding area, the artifacts visible near the opening. The children explored cautiously, collecting pretty stones and asking questions about the miners who had once worked these tunnels. "This is where Mom saved us," Liam explained seriously to Elijah, pointing to the spot where they had huddled together. "She gave us her jacket even though she was freezing." "And this is where Ranger found us," Emma added, indicating the bend in the tunnel. "He knew we needed help." The simple retelling from the children's perspective touched something deep in both adults. Their individual acts, Sarah's sacrifice, Elijah's rescue, acknowledged without drama or embellishment, simply accepted as the things people do for those they care about. As they prepared to leave, Elijah set up his tripod and camera timer, something he rarely did, preferring to remain behind the lens. "Everyone together," he directed, positioning them near the mine entrance with the summer forest as backdrop. The resulting photograph captured a moment of transformation. 4 people and a dog standing at the threshold between past and future, between danger and possibility. Their expressions reflected their journey. The children's open happiness, Sarah's serene confidence, Elijah's quiet contentment. Behind them, the mine entrance stood as a reminder that sometimes the darkest places lead unexpectedly to light. Later, framed copies of this image would take pride of place in both their homes, the cabin on the mountain and the house in Albany, a visual testament to the truth they had discovered together, that rescue comes in many forms, that families can be both born and chosen, and that second chances sometimes arrive in the unlikeliest of circumstances. The spiral continued to unfold, carrying them forward through seasons of challenge and joy, separate and together, each turn bringing new depth to their shared journey. What had begun in desperate survival had transformed into something neither Sarah nor Elijah could have imagined that frozen night in the mine. Not an ending to their respective losses, but a beginning that honored what came before, while embracing what could yet be. And through it all, the mountains stood witness, ancient, enduring, indifferent to human timelines, yet somehow benevolent in their steadfast presence. Changeless themselves, they had become the backdrop for profound change in those who found both peril and promise within their forested slopes. 2 years after the fateful night in Silvercrest Mine, autumn painted the Adirondacks in spectacular hues of crimson, gold, and burnt orange. The mountains, transitioning between seasons, reflected the changes that had unfolded in the lives of those who had found each other in unlikely circumstances. The cabin had evolved alongside its occupants. No longer solely Elijah's fortress of solitude, it now served as a shared sanctuary, a second home for the Mitchells and primary residence for Elijah, who still valued the peace of the mountains but no longer needed isolation to survive. This particular October weekend marked a special occasion, the official opening of the Silvercrest Mine Historical Exhibit. After months of careful restoration and preparation, the first section of the mine was being opened to the public as an educational site. Elijah's photographs formed the centerpiece of the exhibition, documenting both the historical significance of the mining operations and the natural beauty that had reclaimed the area. "Do I really have to wear this?" Liam, now 8, tugged at the collar of his button-down shirt as they prepared for the opening ceremony. In the 2 years since the rescue, he had grown taller, his features maturing while retaining the thoughtful expression that reminded Sarah so much of Robert. "Yes, you do," she replied, smoothing his perpetually unruly hair. "This is important to Elijah, and part of the proceeds will go to the mountain rescue teams. Remember how they helped get us down from the mountain?" Liam stopped fidgeting, sobered by the reminder. "Okay, but after the speeches, can I change?" "We'll see," Sarah compromised, knowing full well the shirt wouldn't last the day. Her son had inherited his father's dislike of formal attire, along with his passion for nature. Emma, now 10, emerged from the guest room she shared with Liam during their visits. Unlike her brother, she had embraced the occasion, wearing a forest green dress with her auburn hair neatly braided. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said, admiring her daughter's emerging sense of style. "Is Elijah nervous?" Emma asked, her perceptiveness regarding emotions far beyond her years. "He was up really early this morning, checking his camera stuff over and over." Sarah nodded, appreciating her daughter's insight. "A little. It's a big day for him. Sharing Clara's research publicly, having his photography featured, and he's not used to being the center of attention." "We should do something special for him tonight," Emma suggested. "To celebrate." "That's a wonderful Idea, Sarah agreed. What did you have in mind? Before Emma could answer, the cabin door opened and Elijah entered with Ranger at his heels. Both appeared freshly washed, Ranger's grey coat gleaming, Elijah's hair still damp from a shower. He wore dark jeans and a collared shirt, his concession to the formality of the occasion. The beard, that had once nearly obscured his features, was now neatly trimmed, revealing a strong jawline and the slight crinkles around his eyes that appeared when he smiled. "Everyone ready?" he asked, his gaze taking in the three of them with quiet appreciation. The Historical Society director. "Just called, press is already arriving." "Almost," Sarah answered, crossing to straighten his slightly crooked collar. The casual intimacy of the gesture spoke volumes about the relationship that had developed between them, comfortable, supportive, built on mutual respect and gradually deepening affection. "You'll do great," she assured him, recognizing the nervousness beneath his composed exterior. "Just remember, you don't have to socialize with everyone. Say your piece during the ceremony, answer the essential questions, then we can fade into the background." His relief was palpable. "Have I mentioned how much I appreciate that you understand my antisocial tendencies?" "Once or twice," she smiled. "It balances out my insistence that you join the PTA fundraising committee." Elijah grimaced at the reminder of his most challenging foray into suburban social obligations. "Don't remind me. I still have nightmares about clipboard-wielding room parents." Their easy banter had become a cornerstone of their relationship, acknowledgement of their differences, wrapped in gentle humor. It provided levity in a connection that had been founded in tragedy and built through careful navigation of complex emotions. The drive to the Silvercrest mine site took them along familiar roads, though the approach had been significantly improved. Where once a barely discernible trail had led to the mine entrance, now a proper parking area accommodated several vehicles, and a wheelchair-accessible path wound through the trees. A small crowd had already gathered: local officials, historical society members, media representatives, and curious community members. Sarah felt Elijah tense beside her as they approached, his comfort zone rapidly receding. "Deep breaths," she murmured. 2 hours tops, then we'll escape to that viewpoint you showed us last month. Just us." He nodded, drawing strength from the promise. "Let's get this over with." The ceremony itself was mercifully brief. The Historical Society director spoke about the importance of preserving mining heritage, acknowledging Clara Carter's original research as the foundation for the exhibit. The local tourism board representative emphasized the economic benefits of historical attractions. When Elijah's turn came to speak, he kept his remarks concise, focusing on the intersection of human history and natural reclamation rather than the personal significance the mine held for him. What he didn't mention, what only the Mitchell family and a few others knew, was how the mine had transformed from a place of professional interest for his late wife to the unexpected catalyst for his second chance at connection. That story remained private, though its essence was captured in the photographs that lined the exhibition space. After the ribbon cutting, attendees were invited to explore the first section of the mine, now safely reinforced and illuminated by tasteful lighting that highlighted geological features while preserving the authentic atmosphere. Educational panels explained the mining techniques, working conditions, and historical context, incorporating excerpts from Clara's research alongside Elijah's striking images. One photograph, positioned near the entrance, showed the exact spot where Sarah and her children had been found. Nothing in the caption revealed this personal connection. It simply identified the location as Main Chamber Junction, East Tunnel. But as the Mitchell family paused before it, the significance resonated between them. "That's where Ranger found us," Liam whispered, unconsciously echoing his words from their previous visit. The dog, wearing his official therapy animal vest that allowed him access to the exhibition, pressed against the boy's leg, as if confirming the memory. You were very brave, Elijah told him, resting a hand on Liam's shoulder. All of you. So were you, Emma countered, looking up at him with the directness that always pierced his defenses. Coming back to a place with sad memories to help strangers. Elijah exchanged a glance with Sarah, both recognizing the depth of understanding in the child's observation. Sometimes, he said carefully, the things that seem like endings turn out to be beginnings in disguise. The philosophical response satisfied Emma, who nodded sagely before moving on to examine the display of mining tools. Sarah lingered with Elijah, their hands finding each other in the dimly lit space. Clara would be proud, she said softly, of the exhibit, of you. He nodded, emotion briefly tightening his features. I think Robert would be too, proud of how you've raised the children, how you've helped them move forward without forgetting. The acknowledgement of their respective losses had become easier, over time, not diminished in significance, but integrated into the narrative of their lives, rather than defining it entirely. They had learned to honor what came before, while embracing what existed now. As predicted, the formal portion of the event lasted about 2 hours. When media attention shifted to the Historical Society representatives, Elijah seized the opportunity to make their escape. With practiced coordination, the family and ranger slipped away from the crowd, taking a lesser-known trail that led to a spectacular viewpoint overlooking the valley. Finally, Elijah sighed as they reached the rocky outcropping. Remind me again why I agreed to this public spectacle? Because you're secretly an exhibitionist? Sarah teased, unpacking the small picnic they had prepared for their getaway. Hardly. He snorted, helping Liam spread a blanket across the flat section of rock. More like temporarily insane. You did great, she assured him more seriously, and it meant a lot to the Historical Society, to Clara's memory. He nodded, accepting this truth. It feels right, sharing her work. Took me long enough to see. That. Healing has its own timeline, Sarah replied. You can't rush it. They settled on the blanket, the autumn sun warming their faces as they shared sandwiches and fruit. The children, freed from their formal obligations, explored the immediate area under Ranger's watchful supervision. Their voices carried on the clear mountain air, excited discoveries of unusual rocks, debates about bird species, the occasional squabble quickly resolved. Sarah watched them with a mixture of pride and wistfulness. They're growing up so fast. Liam's nearly the age Emma was when her voice trailed off, the memory of their near disaster momentarily surfacing. But they're thriving, Elijah observed, despite everything. Losing Robert, the incident at the mine, maybe even partly because of those things. They've learned resilience early. They have, she agreed. They've also learned that family can expand in unexpected ways. She gave him a meaningful look. Which brings me to something I've been wanting to discuss with you. Elijah raised an eyebrow, recognizing her tone. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just significant. Sarah took a deep breath. My school contract is up for renewal in January. Are they giving you trouble? He asked, immediately concerned. Sarah had been teaching English at the same high school since before Robert's death, her position a crucial source of stability for the family. No, nothing like that. Actually, they've offered me a promotion, department chair. She hesitated. But I've been thinking about other options, specifically about the teaching position at the Mountain View School. Elijah's expression shifted. From concern to surprise. Mountain View was a small progressive school in the nearest substantial town to his cabin, about 30 minutes down the mountain. The one with the environmental focus? Sarah nodded. They have an opening for an English teacher with a creative writing emphasis. The salary is actually comparable to my current position with the department chair promotion. And they're known for their outdoor education program. The kids would thrive there. Understanding dawned slowly on Elijah's face. "You're thinking about moving, here, to the mountains. Not to the cabin," she clarified quickly, "but maybe to River Junction. There are some nice properties there, still with mountain views, but close enough to amenities, and only 30 minutes from here." Elijah was silent, processing the magnitude of what she was suggesting. For 2 years, they had maintained separate residences, weekends, holidays, and summer breaks spent together at the cabin, Elijah making regular trips to Albany in between. The arrangement had worked, allowing their relationship to develop naturally while giving the children stability and Elijah the space he sometimes still needed. "This is a big decision," he said finally, "for all of you. The kids would be changing. Schools, leaving friends. You'd be farther from your sister, from your support network." "I've thought about all that," Sarah acknowledged. "But I've also thought about what we gain. More time together without constant commuting. A community that values the natural world like we do. Schools that align with our priorities for the children." She reached for his hand. "I'm not asking for a conventional arrangement, Elijah. I know you still need your space, your solitude sometimes. That wouldn't change, but we could be closer, build something more integrated." "Have you discussed this with Emma and Liam?" he asked, his expression unreadable. "In general terms. They know it's a possibility we're considering." Sarah watched him carefully. They're excited about the idea, especially Liam. He talks about nothing but being able to explore the mountains more often. Elijah nodded slowly, looking out over the spectacular autumn vista. "And you? Are you sure you wouldn't grow to resent the smaller community, the harsher winters, being away from city conveniences?" "I've spent enough time here over the past 2 years to know what I'd be getting into," she replied. "This place, it speaks to me. Not the same way it speaks to you, perhaps, but it resonates nonetheless." They fell silent, watching the children and Ranger return from their explorations, faces flushed with excitement and exertion. "Mom, Elijah, we found a fox den," Liam exclaimed, dropping onto the blanket beside them. "It's empty now, but Ranger could smell that foxes used it last spring. And we saw 3 different kinds of woodpeckers," Emma added, pulling out her small field notebook where she had begun documenting wildlife sightings. "Can we come back tomorrow with your good camera, Elijah? I want to try getting better pictures." Their enthusiasm, their natural affinity for this environment underscored Sarah's point. The children had already formed a deep connection to these mountains, finding healing and growth among the forests and streams. "We'll see about tomorrow," Elijah answered, his gaze meeting Sarah's over their heads. "Right now, I believe there was talk of a celebration, something about my successful navigation of public speaking without fleeing into the wilderness." "Yes," Emma perked up. "We have a surprise planned, but it's back to the cabin." "A surprise, huh?" Elijah feigned suspicion. "Does it involve glitter? Because Ranger and I have strong feelings about glitter in the cabin." "No glitter," Liam promised solemnly. "Just something awesome. Can we go back now?" As they packed up their picnic, Elijah pulled Sarah aside. "About what you suggested, the move. I need some time to think about it. It's not that I don't want it. It's just a big change," she finished for him. "I understand. There's no rush, no pressure. The position doesn't open until January, and we'd need time to sell the house in Albany anyway. Just consider the possibilities." He nodded, his expression softening. "I will, seriously." The celebration at the cabin turned out to be a specially prepared dinner. The children had collaborated with Sarah earlier to plan a menu featuring Elijah's favorites, followed by the presentation of a handmade scrapbook. Each page contained photographs, drawings, and written memories documenting their evolving relationship over the past 2 years. "It's a family history," Emma explained as Elijah carefully turned the pages. Because we decided we are a family now, even if it's a different kind. The simple declaration, delivered with a child's straightforward certainty, brought unexpected emotion to Elijah's typically composed demeanor. He studied a page featuring Liam's photographs alongside Emma's pressed wildflowers and Sarah's elegant handwriting. "This is," he began, then had to clear his throat. "Thank you, all of you." Later, after the children were asleep, Sarah and Elijah sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. The conversation from earlier hung between them, neither rushing to resolve it. "You know," Elijah said finally, "when I first found you in the mine, I never imagined that you'd be stuck with us permanently." Sarah supplied a small smile. "That I'd want to be," he corrected gently. "After Clara and Hannah died, I thought that part of life was over for me, finished, sealed away." And now he considered the question, giving it the thoughtful attention he applied to everything meaningful. "Now I understand it differently. What we lost doesn't disappear. It becomes the foundation for what comes next, if we let it." Sarah nodded, understanding completely. "Like mine. Once abandoned, now repurposed, but still essentially itself." "Exactly." He turned to face her, his expression resolved. "I think you should apply for the teaching position. We should look at properties in River Junction, not because I need you and closer or want to change our arrangement, but because it feels like the natural next step in whatever this journey is." "Are you sure?" Sarah searched his face for any hesitation. "This isn't a decision to make lightly." "I've never been more certain of anything," he replied with unexpected conviction, "except perhaps rushing into a blizzard, because my dog insisted there was something important in an abandoned mine." The reference to their beginning brought a smile to Sarah's face. "That did work out rather well, all things considered." "It did," he agreed, drawing her closer. "Against all odds." As they sat together in companionable silence, the future unfolded before them. Not a straight path, but a winding trail through these mountains that had first endangered them, then saved them, and finally brought them home, different from what either had imagined for themselves after their respective losses, but somehow right, somehow meant. Inside the cabin, the scrapbook lay open on the table, its final pages still blank, waiting for the next chapters of their unconventional, unexpected, yet undeniably authentic family story. A narrative that had begun in desperate survival and evolved into something neither could have foreseen that frozen night in Silvercrest Mine. The mine itself now stood as a testament to transformation, from active industry to abandoned danger, to historical treasure, its darkest corners illuminated, its story preserved and shared. Much like the people whose lives had intersected within its walls, it had found new purpose without erasing its past. Tomorrow would bring decisions, plans, practical considerations. But tonight, under a canopy of stars that had witnessed their entire journey, they allowed themselves to simply be together, healing, whole in a way neither had thought possible again. Different from before, marked by their losses, but no longer defined by them. The mountain stood sentinel around them, ancient and enduring. Within its embrace, a family forged in unlikely circumstances continued to find their way forward, step by careful step, season by changing season, their shared path illuminated by the understanding that sometimes rescue arrives in forms we never expected, and healing comes from directions we never thought to look. 5 years after the fateful night in Silvercrest Mine, summer sunshine bathed the mountains in golden light. The small house in River Junction stood with its doors and windows open, catching the mountain breeze that rustled through tall pines surrounding the property. It was a modest home with a large wraparound porch and an expansive view of the valley, close enough to town for practicality, but far enough into the foothills to satisfy the family's love of wilderness. Sarah stood in the kitchen, preparing a picnic lunch while watching through the window as Emma, now 13, practiced her photography skills in the garden. The girl had developed a serious interest in botanical documentation, combining her love of nature with a natural eye for composition she seemed to have absorbed from Elijah. "Mom!" Liam's voice carried from the front of the house. "They're here!" Sarah smiled, wiping her hands on a dish towel before joining her son on the porch. At 11, Liam had shot up in height, all gangly limbs and boundless energy. His camera, a real one now, not his father's old digital, perpetually hanging around. His neck. A familiar truck pulled into the driveway, Ranger's grey head poking out the passenger window, despite his advancing years. Elijah emerged from the driver's side, reaching back to help a small, elderly woman step carefully down from the back seat. "Sorry we're late," he called, guiding his companion toward the house. Margaret wanted to stop and look at the falcon nest near Pine Ridge. "And it was absolutely worth it," the woman declared, her eyes bright with enthusiasm, despite the deep lines marking her face. Magnificent birds. Elijah got some wonderful shots. Margaret Wells, Clara's mother and Elijah's former mother-in-law, had re-entered his life 2 years earlier after seeing his photography featured in a traveling exhibition about Adirondack conservation. The reunion had been tentative at first, weighted with shared grief, but had gradually evolved into a healing connection for both. Now, in her 70s, Margaret visited every summer, staying in the guest room at the River Junction house rather than at Elijah's more remote cabin. "Just in time for lunch," Sarah assured them, coming down the steps to embrace Margaret. "How was your morning adventure?" "Illuminating," Margaret replied with the enthusiasm of a lifelong naturalist. "Elijah's documenting the falcon family for his new book. The chicks are nearly ready to fledge." Elijah exchanged a smile with Sarah over the older woman's head. Margaret's zest for life and her ability to speak of Clara with love rather than just sorrow had been instrumental in helping him fully integrate his past with his present. Her acceptance of Sarah and the children, her insistence on becoming part of their unconventional family, had bridged worlds that might otherwise have remained separate. The day's plan was simple but significant: a family picnic at Silvercrest, mine to mark the 5th anniversary of the night that had changed everything. The site, now a popular historical attraction, closed to the public on Mondays, allowing them private access through Elijah's continuing relationship with the Historical Society. As they gathered supplies and loaded the vehicles, the easy choreography of their movements spoke of years spent learning each other's rhythms. Emma helped Margaret with her walking stick and field guides. Liam and Ranger raced between vehicles, ensuring nothing was forgotten. Sarah and Elijah worked in tandem, exchanging few words, but communicating through glances and brief touches. Their relationship had evolved into something unique, not fitting conventional definitions, but working for them nonetheless. Elijah maintained his cabin deeper in the mountains, still needing occasional solitude, particularly when working on intensive photography projects. But he spent most nights at the River Junction house, seamlessly integrated into the daily life of the family, while respecting boundaries all around. 5 years, Sarah mused, as they drove the now familiar road toward the mine. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago," Elijah added, glancing in the rearview mirror at the children, and Margaret engaged in animated conversation in the back seat. "A different lifetime." "In many ways it was," she acknowledged, "for all of us." The Silvercrest mine parking area was empty when they arrived, the closed Mondays sign prominently displayed. The site had become a significant regional attraction, drawing history enthusiasts, school groups, and tourists interested. In the area's mining heritage, Clara's research formed the backbone of the educational content, while Elijah's photography brought the human and natural elements to life. They walked the well-maintained path to the entrance, now framed by an informative gateway that incorporated the original weathered warning sign as a historical artifact. Inside, modern lighting illuminated the reinforced tunnels, making the space both safe and atmospherically authentic. "I still can't believe you three were found here," Margaret commented, looking around with a historian's appreciation. "Such a confluence of circumstances." "Ranger deserves most of the credit," Elijah reminded her, reaching down to scratch behind the aging dog's ears. He knew something was wrong. They made their way to a small chamber that had been converted into a picnic area for educational groups. This wasn't the exact location where Sarah and the children had been found. That section remained part of the tour route, marked by a discreet plaque acknowledging a miraculous rescue without naming those involved. This private story within the public space remained theirs alone. As they spread out their picnic, Liam suddenly asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't gotten lost that day? If we'd just gone home like normal?" The question hung in the air, its depth surprising from the usually action-oriented boy. "I think about it sometimes," Emma admitted, arranging sandwich materials with methodical precision. "We might never have met Elijah and Ranger. We'd still be in Albany. Everything would be different." "Or perhaps not so different," Margaret suggested, gently. "I've lived long enough to believe that people who are meant to find each other eventually do, perhaps through different circumstances, but they find their way." "That's a comforting thought," Sarah said, handing out plates. "Though I could have done without the hypothermia part of our meet-cute." Elijah's rare laugh echoed in the chamber. Not exactly a romantic comedy setup, was it? The easy reference to their harrowing beginning reflected how far they had come, able to acknowledge the danger while appreciating the unexpected gift it had ultimately delivered. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally between past and present. Margaret shared stories of Clara's childhood adventures in these mountains, helping the children connect with the woman whose research had preserved this place. Elijah spoke of his latest photography project, documenting the return of wildlife to formerly developed areas, a metaphor for resilience that wasn't lost on any of them. "I got accepted to the Young Naturalists summer program," Emma announced during a lull in conversation, "the one at the Mountain Research Station." "Emma, that's wonderful news," Sarah exclaimed. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" The girl shrugged, with the studied casualness of early adolescence, though her eyes revealed her pride. "I just found out yesterday. The director called while you were at your department meeting." "It's a prestigious program," Elijah noted, his quiet pride evident. "Only 20 students selected from across the Northeast." "Elijah's recommendation letter probably helped," Emma acknowledged, giving him a quick, shy smile. "And the portfolio we put together." The interaction highlighted the relationship that had developed between them, not attempting to replace her father, but offering a different kind of guidance, particularly in areas where their interests aligned. Emma had found in Elijah a mentor for her scientific and artistic pursuits, while Liam connected with him through wilderness skills and photography. After lunch, they explored parts of the mine that held personal significance. At the exact spot where Ranger had first discovered Sarah and the children, they paused for a moment of silent reflection. The dog, sensing the importance of the location, pressed close to Liam's side. "I've been thinking," Elijah said as they walked back toward the entrance, his voice thoughtful. "The Foundation wants to expand the educational programs here. They've asked me to develop a photography workshop series focused on documenting historical sites and their natural surroundings." "That sounds perfect for you," Sarah observed, "combining your expertise in both areas." "There's more," he continued. They want to establish a permanent position, program director for visual documentation, year-round work, though not full-time. I'd still have flexibility for my other projects. Sarah studied his expression, reading the consideration behind it. You're thinking of accepting? I'm considering it, he acknowledged. It would mean a more consistent presence here, more community involvement. The implications hung unspoken between them. Throughout their years together, Elijah had maintained a careful balance, connected to their family while preserving elements of his former solitary existence. This potential position represented another step toward integration with the wider world. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, Margaret interjected, having overheard the exchange. Clara would be delighted to see her research continuing to educate and inspire through your work, Elijah. His expression softened at the mention of his late wife. That's part of why I'm considering it. It feels like completing something she started. As they emerged from the mine into the summer sunshine, the contrast between the cool darkness behind them and the vibrant light ahead seemed symbolic of their journey, acknowledging the shadows of the past while continuing to move toward brightness. The children ran ahead with Ranger, eager to show Margaret a particular viewpoint. Sarah and Elijah lingered, watching them go. Are you happy, she asked suddenly, turning to face him, with how things have worked out, this unconventional life we've pieced together? Elijah considered the question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. Happy seems too simple a word. Grateful, maybe. Whole in a way I never expected to feel again. He looked at her directly. Are you? Yes, Sarah replied without hesitation. Not because everything is perfect, or because the hard parts have disappeared, but because we've created something real together, something that honors what came before. While making space for what is now, they walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Elijah spoke again. Next month marks 7 years since Clara and Hannah died. 7 years since I retreated to the cabin, convinced I was done with connecting to anyone. Sarah nodded, knowing the significance of this anniversary for him. Are you thinking about doing something special to mark it? Actually, yes, he replied. I'd like to take all of you, the kids, Margaret, to Hannah's favorite spot on the mountain. It's a small lake, difficult to access, but beautiful. We used to camp there every summer. The invitation represented a significant step, sharing not just his present life, but intimate aspects of his past that he had long kept separate. We'd be honored, Sarah said simply, recognizing the magnitude of what he was offering. From ahead, on the trail came Liam's excited voice. Mom, Elijah, hurry up! We found a red fox with kits. The mundane miracle of their daily life called them forward. Children discovering the natural world, an elderly woman finding renewed purpose in sharing her knowledge, a dog enjoying his senior years among people who appreciated his crucial role in their story. And at the center, 2 individuals who had found unexpected healing in each other's broken places. As they quickened their pace to join the others, the Adirondack Mountains stood as they had for millennia, indifferent to human timelines, yet somehow benevolent in their steadfast presence. These peaks had witnessed their entire story, the desperate night of survival, the gradual thawing of grief, the careful construction of something new and valuable from the remnants of what was lost. The Silvercrest Mine, once a place of danger and desperate shelter, now stood preserved and purposeful, its darkest corners illuminated, its history honored. Like the people whose lives had intersected within its walls, it had found new meaning without erasing its past. Years earlier, a blizzard had driven a widowed mother and her children into an abandoned mine shaft, while miles away, a mountain man who'd lost his family felt an inexplicable pull to venture into a storm. What had seemed like random tragedy, being lost, being frozen, being alone, had ultimately revealed itself as the beginning of an unexpected journey toward healing, connection, and home. Not replacement for what was lost, but space for what could still be found. Not forgetting, but remembering without being consumed. Not perfection, but authenticity in all its complicated beauty. As they gathered around the fox den, speaking in hushed voices while Elijah captured images of the mother fox, watching her playful kits, the circle of their story seemed complete, yet ongoing, a narrative of rescue that had expanded beyond that single night to encompass all the ways they continued to save each other, day by ordinary day, in the shadow of the mountains that had first endangered them, then saved them, and finally brought them home. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.